Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm Emma. I'm the program manager for Lake Windermere Ambassadors. I've been working here for about a year and a half now, working on some very cool projects, and I'm super excited to be involved at all of the programs that we're running right now. Trying to hide this. Okay. All right, so first off, I'd love to say that I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which our organization operates on is the shared unceded traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and Sequepin people. I also want to say a big thank you to our aquatic and environmental consultant teams for all their hard work and dedication to this project that I'll be talking about today. So big thanks to Lorat and EcoState. And also big thank you to Amy Baxter, who was the former program coordinator, for all her hard work on this project. And of course, big thanks to our volunteers and our funders. None of this would be possible without you guys. So quick introduction, so just presentation overview. I'm going to go into a quick intro for our organization, an overview of current programs and projects that we're working on, some key background on Lake Windermere, and then dive into our recreational impact and carrying capacity study. And then towards the end, I'll kind of give you guys some tips on how you can maybe change your recreational habits or get involved. And then please save any questions you have for the end there. So the Lake Windermere Ambassadors are a society focused on directing water quality monitoring and the stewardship of Lake Windermere to realize our vision of healthy waters for healthy communities forever. We do conduct regular water quality monitoring of the lake and some of its main tributaries. We also are involved on various projects such as public access to the lake, bank swallow monitoring with BC Parks, and our main focus the last couple of years has been on our recreational impact and capacity assessment study, which I'll dive into a bit later. Along with our monitoring and project work, we do also focus on educating our community through outreach. At this summer, we had a boater education booth set up at the boat launch all summer, which we hope to continue to do the next years. It was great. You can sometimes see us at farmers markets. We do host a free kids camp, some cleanup events, and the occasional course such as Green Shores for Homes. So just some background on our lake here. So Lake Windermere is an extremely popular recreation spot located in the East Kootenays of British Columbia. We're at the headwaters of the Columbia River, and we're part of the Columbia Wetlands, which is one of the longest intact wetlands in North America. Our lake provides a key tourism draw. It's an important drinking source for our community, drinking water source. It is technically a widening of the Columbia River, so it only has a residence time of approximately 47 days, which allows the lake to effectively assimilate nutrients. Some key background that I want to point out on this slide for this presentation is the shallowness. So as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my arrow there, but our lake is quite shallow with only an average depth of 3 to 4 meters, and then reaching a maximum depth of 6.5 meters in a very small area of the lake. And this does vary seasonally, the depth. So due to how shallow it is, it does have naturally elevated temperatures compared to other BC freshwater lakes. So the clarity and the warmth do make it quite desirable for recreation. However, the warming of the lake over the past few years has raised some concerns. So today I'm going to be focusing on our recreational carrying capacity study. I know that's a big term right there, so I'll break it down for you. But basically, the study was to understand the recreational impacts on our lake's aquatic ecosystem and focus on water quality, ecologically significant habitats, drinking water intakes, and aquatic life. So what is carrying capacity? So it's the concept of identifying a peak or total amount of activity that can occur before a tipping point is reached. So on lakes, there are two important capacities to consider. First is a recreational carrying capacity, or the number of vessels that can use a lake safely. And second, there's an environmental carrying capacity. So this varies by the amount of habitats, the diversity of habitats present along and within the lake. So briefly, I'll just touch on our study design to give you guys an idea of what we've been working on the last couple seasons here. So we began with identifying high value and at-risk habitat in Lake Windermere, considering fish and wildlife values. 2022 and 2023 summer, we also began taking surveys of boat usage, their locations and activities, just to kind of have an idea of who's using the lake and what they're doing on the lake. We also considered sediment deposition rates by analyzing sediment traps that we placed in both high and low boat use areas and areas of differing substrate. Along with those kind of three key pieces, we did obtain historic and current turbidity data, algae samples, phosphorus levels, other boat use data, not just from us, and then also tried to identify different areas of sensitive habitats. So once we gather all this information, so our study did end up going to a phase 2. So we're technically still in it right now. The end goal was initially, and it still is, to create a risk-based vulnerability map. So what that means is trying to map out areas on the lake where recreation is going to be more harmful ecologically, and maybe identifying some areas that maybe recreation is a little bit more allowed. So some of the concerns that led us to our ongoing study, wake boats are kind of one of the things that were brought up pretty early. Our consultants had actually worked on another project in the Okanagan, quite similar to this, which is why we decided to go with them on this. Wake boats are designed to have what's called a downward propeller wash. So compared to something like a speed boat, the wake boat not only pushes outward, but pushes downward into the bottom of the lake. You can kind of see this diagram here. What happens with that is the downward directed propeller wash can disturb lake bottoms at 6 meters and greater. So as I mentioned before, Lake Windermere is only on average 3 to 4 meters. So the majority of our lake is quite vulnerable to these effects. And these effects can be enhanced when large ballasts are present. So a lot of the modern wake boats nowadays have they call them ballasts, and they fill with water to weigh down the back of the boat. So it creates a more desirable, a larger wake for activities such as surfing. So the issue with this is obviously our lake is quite shallow, so we know that it's going to be impacting that. We also have a really fine silty bottom in most areas of the lake, so that makes the likelihood for resuspension much greater. So I keep saying this word, sediment resuspension. Why does it matter? Why is it important? Sediment, when you have sediments being released from the bottom, you're kind of disrupting a lake's natural process. So lakes tend to store some toxins and heavy metals kind of within the bottom, same as wetlands do. So when we stir that up, we're kind of reversing that process. So sedimentation of important fish spawning habitats can destroy those habitats, can ruin mussel beds. It can increase turbidity, so that can reduce light penetration to aquatic plants. Fish can become stressed due to clogging of gills, suffer navigational trouble, and other physiological stressors. The main concern on our lake is the resuspension of toxins, heavy metals, and nutrients within the water column, which have the potential to lead to declining water quality over the long term. So this is a concern, especially for wildlife, but also near drinking water intakes. So just to give you guys an idea, I hope this will work. I'm going to show you a little video that was done by Lorat, which are the consultants we worked for. So this was actually a video done on a lake in the Okanagan, Kalamalka Lake. It's a very similar like structured lake to ours. So you'll kind of just get an idea of what the impacts of specifically wake boats are, again, with that downward propeller wash. So as you can see in the video, you can see the sediment plume coming up from the bottom. Just go over a few more angles of that. So that's quite visual. That's one pass of a wake boat filmed by drone. And then actually a recent study by Terra Vigilis Environmental Services in 2022 found that total phosphorus levels increased by an average of 25% with only 2 passes of a wake boat in surf mode, so with the ballast filled in waters 4.5 to 7.6 meters deep on the lakes that they studied. So a significant concern of these impacts is the resuspending toxins and heavy metals into the water column, which have serious implications for the aquatic environment. I'm going to drag you along to, so here what they do is they actually do passes at different depths in the water. So you can see the impact of the wake boat in water at 2 meters, and then it goes to 3, 4, 5. So here's at 2, the wake boat is passing just above the buoy that it's tied to, so you can see the amount of sediments that are stirred up on the bottom there at 2 meters, which a lot of our lake it's quite shallow. We actually were trying to go sampling last week, and we had to cut our trip short because with the drought, this has been such an early, we just have such a shallow season, so we couldn't even finish our sampling on our lake this year. So this is 3 meters. You can see there's lots of sediment resuspension. This is 4 meters. Again, the majority of our lake is less than 4 meters deep. And we'll play it till about 5 or 6 meters, just to give you guys an idea. So it is happening less at this point, but you do still see it. And then at 6 meters. So the maximum depth of our lake is around 6 meters. This year it's been even shallower. So some sediment resuspension, not too much, but they were finding it up to about 8 meters in this specific study. So the results of our study that we did take some core samples and place sediment traps along the bottom of the lake in different points. So based on our findings, Lake Windermere sediments contained elevated arsenic, copper, and lead exceeding 80% of the maximum allowable concentration warning thresholds. And of these, arsenic exceeded the BC sediment quality guideline, with 7 out of 9 sites exceeding the guideline by as much as double. The deep site did have the highest values for most parameters, likely attributed to sediment focusing to the deepest point of the lake every time it becomes resuspended. And then we also have the concern of hydrocarbons. So sediment cores show detectable hydrocarbons at 6 out of 9 sites distributed throughout the lake. Phytoplankton densities were moderate in the south half of the lake, while in the north 2 sites we saw very high densities, which were potentially toxic cyanobacteria. The beach sample in particular was of concern, with around over 21,000 cells per milliliter of cyanobacteria, which is a very concerning result for a popular swim area. And while it's likely to lead to acute cyanotoxicity, it's called, chronic low dose exposure can't be ruled out. So for those that don't know what cyanobacteria is, it is a toxic component to certain types of algae. It's not in all types of algae. A lot of algae can be quite healthy, depending on its amount. But we did find elevated phosphorus levels, which do pose a significant risk of cyanobacteria blooms happening on our lake. Again, we do have a residence time of around 47 days, which definitely helps with this. But it doesn't leave our lake immune to this. So cyanobacteria is very toxic to wildlife, animals, or even small children. Adults may get quite ill, but it's typically not lethal in anything other than dogs and small animals or children. But it's definitely a concern that we've had our eye out for some time on the lake, and so we have actually implemented some new monitoring protocols to test for this a little bit more regularly in the next few seasons, or the next few years, sorry. All right, so moving on to another concern. Those were kind of all the results that we were able to uncover in that particular study, but we do suspect a few more things are happening. So we do participate in bank swallow monitoring. Bank swallows are an at-risk species. Their habitat is becoming less and less. Lake Windermere does provide like a very ideal habitat for them because we have these very fine sediment banks. As you can see here, we have these all along kind of the east end of our lake, east side of our lake, and a few along the west. But the issue with these banks is the width of our lake is about 0.5 kilometer to 2 kilometers wide. So when a boat, specifically a wake boat, something designed to create such a big wake, goes by, the wave doesn't have enough time and space to dissipate before it hits those banks. So what's happening is we're getting erosion at the bottom of the banks. So once that erosion kind of happens, the top of the bank then collapses along with it. We were working with a biologist her focus has been on the bank swallows for a number of years, and she had estimated that the banks were eroding around 10 centimeters every year, which doesn't sound like much, but over time that is quite a significant amount, especially when you see some of the homes built so close to the waterfront. So yeah, in wider lakes, you don't necessarily have this problem as much. So where I grew up in Ontario, right on the Canadian Shield. Our lake was quite wide. It has a really rock solid base. When you step down onto it, you're touching rock, maybe about a centimeter or so of fine sediment. Whereas when you step into the lake bottom of Lake Windermere, it can be quite squishy at some points. So a lot more susceptible to that sediment resuspension, and you can see kind of the makeup of the geology around our lake through this photo. So another thing just on this point with the wake actually hitting the shoreline, it can swamp a lot of water bird nests and sensitive shoreline habitats that would typically be sheltered from wind-generated waves. A study showed that boat traffic correlates with up to a 50% increase in turbidity and accelerated shoreline erosion. Many studies found this. And then the kind of obvious one that everyone's quite aware of is the introduction of invasive species. Luckily, so far, we do not have any invasive mussels in the lake. We do have quite a population of the native mussels, which we were trying to get a study going this year, but just due to some timing issues, we have a lot of projects on the go. We're going to have to postpone that till next year, but once invasive mussels are in our lake, that's quite a problem, and it's honestly, in my opinion, closer to a matter of time than anything. So it just takes one to get in our lake. So cleaning your boats are super important, but not only just the outside. If you do have a wake boat with those ballasts, you can be transporting invasive aquatic plants or the freshwater mussels. So it's really important to be checking your boats, even your kayaks, before you move into a different water body. And then the last kind of thing I want to touch on with this for our recreational carrying capacity was that aggressive recreation in lake environments can also pose a safety risk for other users. So on weekends of really high concentration use in the summers, we typically receive feedback from the public reporting feeling unsafe due to the number of motorized boats on the lake. And the wake generated from those boats. So our little sampling boat, when we're out there peak summer, we've definitely felt this as well. When, you have 50 massive boats going by you, that little sampling boat doesn't really stand a chance on those big waves. But especially on days like Canada Day weekend, you can see top of my head here, I would estimate around 300 to 500 boats out there at a given time. And then if we go back to this side quickly, again, there's just not much room for that safe recreation in terms of the ecology of the lake. If you're looking at the sediment resuspension, we only have this small portion of the lake where it actually reaches a depth to maybe not impact it as much. But then again, because we don't have the width, regardless, no matter where you go on the lake, you're still creating massive waves that aren't having the time to dissipate before they hit the shoreline. And then so all those results kind of led us into phase 2 of our study. So going forward, we followed suggestions from the phase 1 report. And we're currently undergoing research for phase 2, which includes more boat count data, more hydrocarbon analysis, and continuing our regular water quality monitoring programs, which we hope will provide us enough information to begin our goal of comprehensive mapping. So the increasing awareness around recreation impacts on our fresh waters have led us to other groups conducting similar studies to our recreational carrying capacity study. So for example, the study that was conducted on Kalamaka Lake and Wood Lake in the Okanagan, where drinking water quality, boat recreation use, habitat values were also used to identify and map areas where recreation was preferred to protect sensitive habitats and drinking water quality. There is actually a local group in their area, looking into creating an app. So taking that information to display something called a play area. So safer zones ecologically for you to be traveling at higher speeds, trying to support, the wake surfing as a recreation type while minimizing environmental stress. So these play areas are kind of low sensitivity habitat zones. And then we could also potentially get kind of high sensitive habitat zones. So like red areas don't go, and then yellow zones, for example, to say like, if you must travel here, go slow. So once they get that app going, it should be pretty easily adaptable to go onto our lake. Once we have our comprehensive map kind of determined at the end of our study. So that's kind of one route that we're hoping to take in the near future. These studies are often perceived as an attack on boaters, but it's not about trying to limit enjoyment of the lake for boaters. We're simply seeking to provide data and information that's needed to ensure Lake Windermere can be enjoyed by everyone for generations to come. So that kind of leads me into some general tips. We were hoping to get a pamphlet going for the public on strategies they can use to improve their boating, but that's taken a little bit longer than expected, but keep an eye out for that in the next few months here. We're working hard on that. And then in general right now, staying in the deep, like keeping an eye on your depth finders are always helpful, trying to stay slow in areas that are shallow, and then if you must travel fast, using the deepest, widest areas of the lake. Of course, checking your boat for any invasives, cleaning them off very well. Avoid going near sensitive shoreline habitats. If you see water bird nests or bank swallow colonies, keep a little bit of distance away. And then also knowing the rules around fishing and always releasing any at-risk species. So we do also have a lot of volunteer opportunities with our organization where we'll host certain days of like cleanup events you can join. We are working on some more volunteer opportunities coming soon, so keep an eye out on that. But yes, so again, eventually creating maps to identify better recreation zones is something that it's a big goal of our study. Until then, the best you can do is try to learn more information, like listening to this webinar and taking in some of those points. Or if you are if you're with a stewardship group and you're looking at doing a study like this on your water body, like you can always reach out to us. We'd be very happy to kind of let you in on how we got going with our study. It did take a few years to get off the ground. And that's all I have for you guys. So if you guys have any questions, you can go for it now.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma.
Sure.
Yes. Sally, if you want to share some of the questions that have come in, that would be awesome.
Sure. So the first question is from Hannah, and they're wondering exactly how you plan to implement the map.
So again, we are quite a small organization, so I wouldn't know how to start an app or anything like that. So because there is an app being worked on currently, we're kind of just hoping that once they get that going, the comprehensive mapping that we create based on the data collected in this study that we're doing right now will enable us to put that map from maybe just a basic format onto an app that can actually be used on your phone while you're on the lake, and you can use it like a Google Maps type thing and see like, okay, like if I go a little more over there, I could be in some sensitive habitat. Like I'd like to stay away from that if possible. And then also just kind of making boaters a little bit more aware of the depth of the lake and what boating in shallow areas can do to the lake bottom. Hope that answers that.
Thanks, Emma. And then Vanessa is wondering, what depth would you say is safe for a wake boat to operate in to minimize the impacts?
So this has been the hard one on our lake because we are seeing impacts at 6 meters and greater, and our lake in particular it only reaches about 6 meters depth at certain times of the year and in a very small area. So on our lake, this has been a struggle with, potentially once we have this information, where do we go with it? I'll bring back the map just for a second here. So the issues are disregarding the width of the lake because there really isn't much you can do about it on ours. If you were to be surfing, I would recommend on our lake in particular, your lake might look a little different, but same concept. If you're going to be doing like a surf round of wake boating, I'd maybe, start up at the end of the deep end and then carry through and then maybe stop and turn back and do your passes through there at high speed. And if you're not traveling at high speeds, then move out the way and use the shallow areas at a slower speed so that others wishing to travel faster can take up that limited room.
Great. So the next two questions kind of go hand in hand. So Sophie is wondering why there isn't the banning of wake boats altogether due to these negative impacts. And then Barb second to that, Barb is wondering if you are aware if Transport Canada is planning to implement any weight boat restrictions.
So again, we are a nonprofit, so it is quite a line that we have to tread carefully on. We cannot be lobbying against any kind of like political decisions. Ideally, we collect as much information as we can on our lake and do the best we can to provide that information to everybody. We are finding concerning results in this lake, so we are going to be bringing it to the attention of different governments. However, it's hopefully, if the results prove to be so detrimental, hopefully our governments will actually take charge on those issues. We've seen it happen in a few areas in the States already. Quebec has started implementing some restrictions, and in my opinion, I don't know if it necessarily would need to be a complete ban. Potentially even we've thought of like a ton of different options for it. Obviously, taking away this form of recreation is heartbreaking to a lot of people, and it's how people have enjoyed our lake for a number of years. So it's something it's not our goal to ban wake boats. However, if our results are proving to be quite extreme, then hopefully some restrictions are in place, whether that means banning boats or whether that means restricting the number of boats on our lake at a given time. So with our lake, the concern is the depth. Again, let's say we do have people that start to use this deep area as doing passes when they're fast travel. That area is only so big, and we get around 300 to 500 boats out there on certain weekends. So logistically, potentially having a toll system that like limits the amount of boats on a lake at a given time. There's a lot of different options, but I think that the first one that we would like to turn to is boater education. And we would love to believe that most people would try their best to reduce those impacts once they're aware of them. And as for Transport Canada, I'm not aware of anything going on in our lake anyways, restriction-wise.
Thanks, Emma. So Lauren is wondering if you have any suggestions of someone to talk to regarding evidence of recreational boat dumping, specifically in Kootenay Lake, but maybe you had a suggestion of how to approach this issue with local representatives or something like that.
Sorry, boat dumping?
Yes, recreational boat dumping.
I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean like leaving your boat in the lake, or? I'm not sure if she just wants to chime in here and
Yeah.
Now we'll wait for a response and see if she can clarify. If not, Lauren, if you want to jump on, or we could get back to you with an email on that question as well.
I Googled it quick, and it looks like she's
Okay.
talking about boat disposal, which there is a lot of garbage at the bottom of our lake. I don't know if boat dumping is a primary concern, but we're actually in conversation with an organization that might be helping us get some underwater cameras down at the bottom of our lake to see the amount of garbage down there. That's always a good start. Just you got to gather your information, how much garbage, and logistically what can be removed and what is almost going to be more impactful if you can remove it. Sometimes, for example, I was in a fish habitat restoration workshop not too long ago, and they were removing a culvert. And sometimes when you actually take out things that are initially harmful for the environment, it can cause a little bit more harm than actually just leaving it. So and also I wouldn't know anything really about how you'd get a boat out of the bottom of the lake. So if you're looking to chat with someone like that, you might want to reach out to someone at Kootenay Lake. I was actually discussing this with someone at a cabin course out in Nelson recently, and they were actually chatting about the amount of boats that are dumped in that lake. So potentially they'd be more able to help you on that.
She clarified sewage was something.
Okay. Sewage has been an issue that we're looking into. A lot of the shoreline properties around our lake were built from anywhere from 50 to 100 years ago. And when they were replaced with these, they were tiny cabins at the time. And then when they were replaced, they had mansions built on top of old septic systems that can't hold the required need for these brand new monster properties. So we don't have the evidence, but we definitely suspect that we're having some septic leakage into our lake, just with some of the concerning numbers of E. coli and other things that we're finding.
Great, thanks, Emma. And then I actually had a question about whether Lake Windermere is a source of drinking water for any nearby communities.
It is for various communities. There's a lot of people that rely on drinking water from this lake. The town of Invermere is mostly off a separate water source. But yes, a lot of the lake does rely on this as its primary drinking source.